The Miami sun poured gold over Ocean Drive, the streets alive with tourists, models, and the faint hum of expensive sports cars gliding past neon signs. Amid this bright, chaotic tableau stood a mansion that seemed almost unreal in its grandeur, Casa Casuarina, Gianni Versace's private kingdom. Its pink walls, adorned with intricate mosaics and towering Corinthian columns, reflected the flamboyant genius of the man who lived inside. For Gianni Versace, life was art. Every garment, every accessory, every public appearance carefully orchestrated, a statement of style and ambition. At 50 years old, Gianni was already a legend. He had transformed fashion into theater, blending bold colors, luxurious fabrics, and provocative cuts into a brand that was unmistakably his own. Models worshipped him, magazines featured him, and Hollywood celebrities sought him out. Versace's charisma was magnetic. He didn't just design clothes, he curated desire, obsession, and admiration. To the world, he was untouchable, a man whose life sparkled as brilliantly as the gemstones he favored. But shadows lurked even in the most dazzling light. Unseen by the public, Gianni had enemies, admirers twisted into obsession, and an undercurrent of danger that no amount of fame could fully shield him from. Among those shadows was Andrew Cunanan, a man who had already left a trail of death across the United States, moving from city to city with a quiet, terrifying precision. Cunanan's crimes were shocking not for their brutality alone, but for their randomness, the sense that anyone could be next. He had no predictable pattern except for a dangerous, growing obsession with wealth, beauty, and fame. Cunanan's journey to Miami had been paved with tragedy, manipulation, and murder. Friends and acquaintances remembered him as charming, intelligent, even seductive, but those who got too close learned that behind the mask lurked a volatile, dangerous mind. By the time he reached Florida, Cunanan had already killed at least 4 men, each death seemingly unconnected, a whisper of chaos that grew louder with every new headline. No one could have predicted that his next act of violence would collide with the glittering world of Gianni Versace. Inside Casa Casuarina, Versace moved through his day as he always had. The mansion was alive with life, staff bustling, assistants arranging fabric swatches, models laughing in rehearsal. Yet even amidst the familiar comfort of his empire, the designer carried a quiet awareness of the world's fragility. Miami was glamorous, intoxicating, and beautiful, but it could also be dangerous. And yet, danger felt distant, almost theoretical when faced with the tangible allure of fame and artistry. Versace's life was one of contrasts, intimate, private spaces surrounded by walls of luxury, public appearances that dazzled millions. He thrived on this duality, yet it was precisely this brilliance that made him a target. Fame, while intoxicating, was also a beacon for those consumed by envy, obsession, or darker desires. Andrew Cunanan, lurking thousands of miles away, was drawn to that brilliance like a moth to a flame. Every newspaper clipping, every television segment, every gossip-filled magazine fed the obsession that would eventually lead him to Miami's sun-soaked streets. The narrative of Part 1 is not just about Gianni's glamour. It is about building tension, planting seeds of unease, and contrasting the opulence of his life with the danger creeping closer. Cunanan's presence is intangible yet felt, a ghost shadowing Gianni's brilliance. The audience senses it, the way a reader feels the chill before a storm breaks. As evening approached, Miami's skyline turned gold and purple. The streets buzzed with life, unaware that the brightest light of all, Gianni Versace himself, was about to intersect with one of the darkest presences the city had ever known. Cunanan was moving carefully, silently across state lines, watching, waiting, planning. Each step he took was deliberate, calculated. To him, the world was a stage, and Versace, the man, the icon, the genius, was to be his final, chilling act. Meanwhile, Versace entertained guests in his mansion, laughing and gesturing animatedly. Cameras clicked, the flashbulbs captured the designer's charisma. Yet even in this lively, intoxicating scene, the narrative hints at underlying tension. The audience knows something the characters in the room do not. The storm is coming. This is the classic suspense structure, juxtaposing the beauty, joy, and vibrancy of Versace's world against the cold, calculating threat that Cunanan represents. Cunanan's journey to Miami had not been immediate. He had maneuvered through cities like a shadow, leaving death and terror in his wake. Each prior murder served as a prelude, each act a rehearsal for the ultimate climax of his obsession. For him, Versace represented more than a person. He was the embodiment of everything he both craved and despised: beauty, fame, success, and the power to command the world's attention. The audience, now aware of both the predator and the prey, feels the tension rise with each paragraph.
July 15, 1997, dawned in Miami like any other summer morning. The sky stretched in brilliant shades of blue, reflecting off the Atlantic waters and casting golden light across the city's palm-lined streets. Ocean Drive hummed with activity, tourists sipping coffee at sidewalk cafes, joggers keeping pace with the rhythm of the city, and locals preparing for another day under the relentless Florida sun. Miami was alive, vibrant, unaware that the bright streets would soon be stained with terror. Inside the walls of Casa Casuarina, Gianni Versace moved with his usual elegance. He wore casual silk attire, his designer sunglasses perched perfectly on his nose, and a faint smile playing across his lips as he prepared for his morning walk. For Versace, this stroll was more than exercise. It was a ritual. He loved watching the city awaken, feeling the pulse of Miami beneath his feet. Every step was deliberate, confident, a man at ease in the world he had shaped for himself. Yet just a few blocks away, a different presence cut across the city with an entirely different energy. Andrew Cunanan was meticulous in his movements, blending into Miami's throngs with practiced ease. He was a ghost in plain sight, his mind a turbulent mix of obsession, envy, and rage. To Cunanan, this day was not ordinary. It was the culmination of an obsession that had been building for months, a single, horrifying act that would etch his name into infamy. Every calculated step he took brought him closer to Versace, and with each passing moment, the tension coiled tighter, like a predator closing in on its prey. As Versace exited his mansion, the bright Miami sunlight reflected off the pale pink walls of Casa Casuarina. Cameras occasionally flashed from inside the grounds, capturing the designer's effortless elegance, but the world outside remained blissfully unaware of the impending horror. Versace's routine was familiar to him. He knew every step, every turn, every gesture of the day's beginning. But to Cunanan, this routine was the map to his obsession, a predictable rhythm that he could exploit. Minutes passed as Versace strolled, greeting a neighbor here, nodding at a passerby there. The warmth of the city contrasted starkly with the cold, unfeeling precision of Cunanan's approach. No one noticed him, blending seamlessly into the shadows, watching, waiting. The ordinary rhythm of Miami, children laughing on nearby streets, the distant roar of traffic, the soft hum of a morning breeze, belied the extraordinary violence about to erupt. Then, in a moment that would forever be seared into history, time seemed to slow. Cunanan emerged from his hiding place, a small handgun clenched in his hand, his eyes locked on the figure of Gianni Versace. There was no hesitation, no last-minute reconsideration. To Cunanan, this was destiny, an act he had rehearsed in his mind countless times. The the tension exploded into action. Gunshots rang out in the quiet morning, cutting through the city like knives. Versace stumbled, shocked, unable to comprehend the sudden lethal attack. Blood spilled onto the warm pavement, glinting in the sunlight, and the glamorous facade of Miami shattered in an instant. Onlookers screamed, some froze in horror, while others instinctively ducked for cover. The vibrant streets, once alive with laughter and casual activity, became a theater of chaos and terror. Police sirens soon pierced the air, growing louder as officers raced toward the scene. Within minutes, the area was swarming with law enforcement, journalists, and shocked onlookers. Helicopters circled overhead, casting harsh beams of light across the city as the story exploded across the globe. Miami, a city accustomed to glitz, nightlife, and headlines about celebrities, had never seen such brazen violence. The murder of Gianni Versace was more than a crime. It was a rupture in reality, a reminder that even the brightest stars were vulnerable. News crews arrived with cameras rolling, broadcasting live to millions. The world watched in disbelief as the opulent mansion, the glittering streets, and the vibrant city became a backdrop for a tragedy that seemed almost surreal. Headlines screamed, "Fashion icon murdered in Miami," "Gianni Versace shot dead," "City in shock." Social media didn't exist yet, but the global ripple was immediate, fueled by television and newspapers. Every detail, from the shattered calm of Ocean Drive to the terrified witnesses, became part of the story that gripped the planet. Investigators began combing the scene with meticulous care, noting every detail: the trajectory of the bullets, the position of the body, footprints and tire marks in the surrounding area. Evidence was collected, statements recorded, and questions asked of those who had been present. Yet, amid the chaos, Cunanan had already vanished, slipping into Miami's labyrinthine streets like a shadow, leaving detectives with more questions than answers. The city reacted in waves of shock and grief. Fashion houses around the world issued statements mourning the loss of their brilliant colleague. Friends and family flew to Miami, unable to fathom that a man known for spreading beauty and joy had been struck down in a moment of brutal violence. Versace's life, which had seemed larger than Miami itself, now became a story of loss, obsession, and sudden mortality. In the midst of the turmoil, Cunanan's presence lingered like a dark cloud. The killer was still at large, invisible, unpredictable, and terrifyingly close. Law enforcement recognized the gravity of the situation. This was no random act, but the calculated strike of a man already known for his lethal tendencies. Miami was on high alert. Streets were patrolled, hotels checked, and homes of the wealthy monitored. Yet Cunanan remained elusive, a phantom whose next move could not be predicted. The murder of Gianni Versace changed the rhythm of Miami forever. Tourists and locals alike became hyper-aware, wary of strangers, cautious in a city that had once been defined by leisure and beauty. Casa Casuarina, once a symbol of glamour, became a crime scene, its pink walls now witnesses to tragedy. The juxtaposition of luxury and violence created a haunting visual memory that would endure in the public imagination for decades.
The morning after Gianni Versace's murder, Miami was a city transformed. Sunlight still glimmered off the waves of the Atlantic, and palm trees swayed lazily in the breeze, but the energy of the city had shifted. Where there had once been laughter, music, and the hum of everyday life, there was now tension, fear, and disbelief. Miami had become a crime scene, a theater for terror, and the world was watching. Law enforcement moved quickly, coordinating an unprecedented manhunt. Detectives, officers, and federal agents combed the streets, interviewing residents, hotel staff, and neighbors. Every camera lens and every witness statement became critical. Surveillance photos from nearby streets were scrutinized. Every car, every pedestrian, every movement was a potential clue. Cunanan had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only chaos and death. Cunanan's pattern of movement had already confounded authorities across the country. From San Diego to New Jersey, he had killed with an eerie combination of charm and brutality, leaving detectives chasing ghosts. Each prior murder seemed random, yet now it formed a terrifying prelude to Versace's death. Miami became the climax of his spree, a city both glamorous and vulnerable, where the brightest star had become his final obsession. The public, meanwhile, was gripped by horror and fascination. Newspapers splashed Cunanan's face across front pages, Miami killer still at large, the shadow behind the fashion icon's death, serial killer on the loose. Television networks interrupted regular programming to provide live updates. Every camera turned toward Casa Casarina, toward the streets where the crime had occurred, toward a city on edge. Journalists interviewed stunned neighbors and shaken tourists, painting a portrait of a city that had lost its innocence in a single morning. Miami residents began to notice an unspoken tension. Strangers were eyed with suspicion, friends whispered warnings to one another. Families who had strolled the sunny streets now hurried through them, looking over shoulders and locking doors. Hotels and restaurants increased security, and private citizens began taking precautions, unsure if the killer might strike again. Cunanan had already demonstrated that no one was safe, and Miami felt the weight of this chilling reality. Investigators worked tirelessly. Detectives reconstructed Versace's final moments, piecing together the timeline, examining the trajectory of the bullets, and analyzing physical evidence left behind. The police understood that every clue was vital, every misstep could allow Cunanan to escape again. But the more they investigated, the more Cunanan's elusiveness became apparent. He was a master of disguise, a man who could blend into a crowd, vanish from sight, and leave no trail. The city's law enforcement faced the daunting reality of hunting a predator who had already proven himself unpredictable and lethal. The media frenzy added another layer of complexity. Journalists, driven by the story's global impact, followed every lead, often arriving before the police could secure the scene. Cameras captured the mansion's ornate gates, the shattered calm of Ocean Drive, and the somber faces of onlookers. Television anchors debated motives, dissected Cunanan's past, and speculated about his next move. The public devoured every detail, from the smallest clue to the most sensationalized theory. In homes around the world, viewers watched Miami transform from paradise to a city haunted by violence. Cunanan himself remained in the shadows. Moving stealthily through the city, he avoided contact with anyone who might recognize him. He had a clear understanding of law enforcement tactics and the media's power. To him, every news report was a confirmation of his growing notoriety, a perverse validation of the obsession that had driven him this far. While the world mourned Versace, Cunanan seemed to revel in the chaos he had unleashed, moving like a phantom through the streets he had terrorized. Despite the fear gripping the city, law enforcement refused to relent. Helicopters patrolled the skies, and officers staked out potential hideouts, hotels, and abandoned buildings. Miami became a chessboard, with each square carefully monitored, and Cunanan the unpredictable piece moving across it. Detectives coordinated with federal authorities, sharing information, leads, and behavioral analyses. Each day brought new pressure to capture him alive, to prevent further tragedy, and to provide closure for a grieving world. The international spotlight intensified the stakes. The murder of a global fashion icon was not only a local crime, it had become a worldwide obsession. Reports flooded from Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Gianni Versace was more than a celebrity. He was a symbol of beauty, ambition, and artistry. His death challenged the illusion of safety that wealth and fame were supposed to provide. As investigators pursued Cunanan, the global audience followed every step, amplifying the tension, fascination, and fear. In parallel, Miami residents grappled with the psychological impact. Street corners, once familiar, now felt threatening. Tourists who had come for sun and luxury questioned their surroundings. Parents kept children close, couples avoided late-night walks, and even the boldest socialites felt a creeping unease. The city's glamour persisted on the surface, but underneath, a collective anxiety had taken root. Cunanan's presence became invisible yet omnipresent, a reminder that violence could erupt in the most unsuspecting moments. Amid the chaos, the narrative explored Cunanan's mindset. He was meticulous, aware of law enforcement strategies, and fueled by a dangerous mix of narcissism and obsession. Each step was calculated to evade capture while maintaining the mystique of danger. Investigators tried to anticipate his next move, but Cunanan's elusiveness kept them constantly on edge. The audience is drawn into this tense dance, Miami's forces versus a brilliant but deranged mind, creating suspense that grips the story tightly. The hunt became a citywide spectacle. Helicopters hovered over Biscayne Bay, officers patrolled the neon-lit streets of South Beach, and police dogs scoured the sand and alleyways. Every lead was followed, every report investigated, yet Cunanan remained a phantom. The combination of his cunning and the city's labyrinthine streets made him nearly untouchable. Miami, a city defined by spectacle, nightlife, and freedom, now felt like a cage. Every exit monitored, every alley watched, every citizen aware of danger.
8 days. 8 days that stretched Miami into a city suspended between fear and fascination. Andrew Cunanan, the man who had shattered the life of Gianni Versace and terrorized communities across the United States, remained a ghost in the streets. Helicopters hovered over Biscayne Bay, police cruisers scoured neighborhoods, and federal agents coordinated with local authorities, yet Cunanan eluded capture. Each day brought new headlines, each report a reminder of the predator still at large. The city had become a stage for a deadly drama, and the world watched every act with bated breath. Miami's residents, who had once strolled carefree along Ocean Drive, now moved with caution. The vibrant nightlife of South Beach, usually pulsing with music and laughter, carried an undercurrent of tension. Hotel managers increased security, homeowners installed additional locks, and locals spoke in hushed tones about the killer in the shadows. Cunanan's presence was invisible but palpable, a lingering threat that transformed familiar streets into corridors of anxiety. Meanwhile, investigators dissected every detail of Cunanan's movements. They traced his steps across neighborhoods, pieced together eyewitness accounts, and analyzed behavioral patterns to anticipate his next move. Detectives examined previous crime scenes, searching for connections that might provide insight into his mindset. Each discovery, each dead end, each fleeting lead added to the mounting tension. Miami had become both a hunting ground and a pressure cooker, and law enforcement was racing against time to prevent further tragedy. Then, on a humid evening in a quiet corner of the city, Cunanan's spree came to its dramatic conclusion. On a houseboat docked in a secluded area, authorities discovered his lifeless body. The killer had chosen to end his life rather than face capture. The revelation sent shockwaves through Miami and across the globe. Cunanan's death closed the manhunt, but left countless questions unanswered about his motives, his psychology, and why he had targeted Gianni Versace. The city breathed a collective sigh of relief, yet the sense of vulnerability lingered. The immediate aftermath of the murder was a mixture of grief, shock, and reflection.
Friends, family, and colleagues of Gianni Versace grappled with the reality of losing a brilliant mind in such a sudden and violent way. The fashion world mourned deeply. Versace was more than a designer. He was a visionary who had transformed the industry with bold, unforgettable creations. His clothing lines, runway shows, and personal charisma had inspired millions. Now, all of that brilliance was framed by tragedy, a reminder of the fragility of life, even for the most famous and admired. Casa Casarina, once a vibrant symbol of Versace's taste and genius, became a poignant emblem of loss. Its pink walls, intricate mosaics, and stately columns stood silently, bearing witness to the violence that had erupted there. The mansion, which had hosted celebrities, parties, and the creation of art, was now forever marked by death. Yet even in its somber new role, it retained the aura of elegance and grandeur, a testament to the life that had been lived within its walls. The narrative of Part 4 emphasizes the psychological and emotional aftermath, exploring the long shadows cast by obsession and violence. Cuninan's actions, though brief in duration, had a lasting impact, not just on the city, but on the global consciousness. The story became a cautionary tale of fame and obsession, a reminder that brilliance can attract danger as much as admiration. Miami, once celebrated for its sun, luxury, and vibrancy, now carried the memory of a violent intersection between glamour and darkness. The media continued to dissect the murder in Cuninan's life, analyzing motives, behavior patterns, and potential missed signs. Documentaries, interviews, and articles examined every facet of the crime, from Cuninan's personal history to Versace's routine life. Psychologists speculated on the obsession that had driven Cunanan, while the public debated the circumstances that had allowed him to reach this tragic climax. The story became part of the cultural lexicon, a chilling example of how fascination and envy can manifest in destructive ways. Despite the horror of his death, Gianni Versace's legacy endured. His designs continued to inspire new generations of fashion enthusiasts. Runways around the world carried forward his vision, his creativity immortalized in fabric, color, and cut. The fashion house, though altered by tragedy, remained a symbol of elegance, innovation, and artistic brilliance. Versace had transcended mortality through his work, a luminous presence in an industry that thrives on spectacle, audacity, and vision. Yet the story of Cunanan remained equally compelling, a dark counterpoint to Versace's brilliance. Scholars, true crime enthusiasts, and psychologists alike dissected his life, examining the factors that led a man to violence, the impulses that drive obsession, and the chilling efficiency with which he executed his crimes. Cunanan became a symbol of the unpredictable, of the human capacity for darkness lurking beneath charm and intellect. The juxtaposition of his destructive path against Versace's creative genius created a haunting narrative that resonated across time and place. Miami, in the months following the murder, slowly regained a semblance of normalcy. Tourists returned to the beaches, nightlife resumed in the clubs, and the city's rhythm returned, but the memory of July 15, 1997, lingered like a shadow. Casa Casarina, eventually opened to the public as a hotel and restaurant, became a place where visitors could reflect on the intersection of beauty, fame, and tragedy. The mansion preserved Versace's legacy while quietly honoring the cautionary tale embedded in its walls. Ultimately, the murder of Gianni Versace was not just a story of a life ended, but a meditation on obsession, fame, and human vulnerability. Cunanan's actions revealed the dark consequences of envy and fixation, while Versace's enduring legacy highlighted the resilience of creativity and the power of human brilliance to transcend even the most violent interruptions. The narrative leaves the audience with a mixture of awe and somber reflection, a story that is as mesmerizing as it is horrifying.